All right, David, let's jump right in here. This is a fairly easy one for me because I see your swing issue virtually every day. Very very common issue, and it stems from getting up there in age, losing flexibility, not having the same mobility we might have had when we were younger, and it's pretty inevitable. It's going to happen to all of us at some point. But first of all, I want to just kind of break down your swing and show you what I see. In your backswing, this first portion of it's pretty standard. Hand path moves in, but at this point is when the flexibility issues start to kick in. So you can no longer continue to rotate. The lower body is pretty much stopped. And you can see that at the top of your backswing, your right arm gets what I would consider very internally rotated. So when I say internal rotation, I'm basically talking about kind of the angle that this forearm bone is in. And if you think about that for a second, when the elbow is positioned that way, your hand is essentially applying a force on the shaft in this direction. And that's why we will typically see that shaft kind of tip out and stand up right there in early transition. And it's just simply because of the rotation of that trail arm. And once that shaft gets a little bit steep like that in transition, we're going to start to see sort of a culmination of things. So we know right here the hand path is shifting out. We know that the right hand is really pushing on that shaft this way, which is keeping that shaft vertical and steep. But you're going to start making some compensating moves with your lower body. Those compensating moves start right here. The first thing that happens is your right knee flexes and your right heel goes up and you go up on your right toe. Now what those things do is that they level out your pelvis like this, and it starts to change the force that you apply to the handle. And that force, and I'm going to show you right here. So we're steep in this phase. When that right foot starts coming up and that right knee starts kicking in, what actually happens is you start changing the direction of the force. So very much early in your downswing, you had kind of a steep hand path. When this right heel comes up and the right knee goes out, the pelvis levels out and it changes the force across the shaft. It makes the hand path move more outward in this phase of the swing. So you can kind of see it right there. The hand path just quickly kind of moves out, and then that allows that sweet spot to kind of drop behind you there. The problem is when you're making those compensating lower body moves and that club is just kind of dropping back behind your hands, we don't have any rotation of the body or any force on the grip pulling this thing around the corner. So A, we're losing speed, but B, we've just kind of got the club falling back behind us, and then we have to kind of use our hands to flip it over and kind of save it. And you'll notice that. I'm sure you've seen this club head kind of flipped over. Now, that is very, very typical of someone who is stalling the rotation of their body, changing the orientation of their pelvis by kicking that knee in and going on plantar flexion on this right foot so that you can change the direction of the force on that handle to a much more outward force so this club can just kind of drop back behind your hands very, very late. And so, this is a pretty simple fix. And, I'm not going to tell you to go out and go to the gym and start working on your mobility and get more flexible, because you're not going to do those things. I mean, most golfers are not going to do that, and there's got to be a workaround. So that workaround is going to be externally rotating your trail shoulder to get the club into a flatter position in the backswing. So I just want to quickly define internal, external shoulder rotation. So again, here's a little diagram. if you rotate your arm forward in this position, that's internal shoulder rotation. And that's kind of what you're doing at the top of your backswing. External would be rotating it in this direction. So if you were going to kind of take an oath, or if you were going to rear back to throw a baseball, you would kind of lead with your elbow, and the right shoulder would externally rotate. So let me throw you back up there real quick. Now, I got an example of a player, Graham McDowell, over here on the right. And I'm using him because you guys have very similar builds, very similar postures, and he has kind of the same mobility issues in terms of rotation of his body that you have in the backswing. And let's get you back up to the top again. So about right there. So I want you to look at your backswing and Graham McDowell's backswing. Okay, so what's the difference? Well, the difference is Graham changes the flex of his knees more than you do, and he gets a lot of depth to his hand path early. So if I drew a straight line down from his shoulders, just to kind of give you an indicator of how much his hands are moving in early, you can really see by the time he gets his left arm parallel to the ground, he's created a lot of depth to the butt of that club relative to that where his lead shoulder started. And let's go back and take a look at you. I mean, you get a decent amount of depth, just nowhere near what we're seeing from Graham over here. Okay? Now, part of that is you're not turning your shoulders as much, which I'd like to see that right shoulder, working much more back in this direction. A little bit more turning of the lower body. I mean, you probably are kind of maxing that out right now, but I think you can turn the upper body a lot more, and I think we can get this left arm just a bit deeper. Now, that depth is going to help us shallow the club. Okay? Here's the move that's very, very much different. So when you go up from this point forward, here's the difference in these two swings. You are internally rotating your arm. And the reason why I know that is because you can follow the center of mass of this club. That little balance point right there. If you follow that, you see that it's moving in this direction. And the center of mass only moves in the direction that a force is being applied to it. So basically your right hand is applying a force on that grip in this direction. Whereas if you watch Graham here, he's going to really, as he goes up, he's going to really start to rotate this left forearm in a pronating fashion from here to the top. And if you kind of pay attention to this logo on his glove, watch how he kind of hides that as he goes up. So he's externally rotating that trail shoulder. Now you're probably looking at it going, well, wait a minute, his forearm looks exactly like mine. And that's true. His right shoulder is internally rotated just like yours is. The difference is he's putting in different forearm rotations. So he's pronating and rotating his left arm that way and supinating his right forearm. And that's what you're going to need to do. You're going to need to put the shaft in a preemptively shallower position. So imagine if you had the club over here. And let's say that is, I don't know, 6 inches shallower. Well, that 6 inches is going to show up in every frame in the downswing. So if we looked at it right here, 6 inches shallower. Shaft would be somewhere about right here. If we looked at it at this point, 6 inches shallower, somewhere in this point. So now all of a sudden the club's starting to be in a very different position. And once that club gets into a very different position, the body is going to need to do something different. So you're not going to be able to kick this right knee in, or you're not going to need to kick this right knee in and raise this right heel and level out this pelvis. You're just simply going to need to turn and pull that grip around your body. So what I want you to do is, let me see if I have a couple examples on here. I want you to do some drills like this right here. And this is a drill that teaches you how to externally rotate just a little bit. He's got his right arm back behind his elbow, which is keep preventing him from pulling it way behind him. But yet you can see how he's put forearm rotations in there to feel the club in a very, very shallow position. And a lot of my guys can actually hit balls in this drill. It's a little bit difficult. It's tricky. I'd rather you kind of do this with mirror work and just feeling that right arm a little bit more external like that. But the key thing is going to be rotating these forearms like you see GMAC over here on the right doing to get that shaft in a much shallower position. So we'll throw you back up here really quick. Again, just to recap, straight line down from the front of the arms. Early in the backswing phase, I want you turning your body as much as you can, and I want you trying to get your right shoulder to work up and back. Pull that right shoulder back behind you and try to get as much depth to the butt of the club by the time you get to this left arm parallel to the ground position. And then as you continue up, I just simply want you to use forearm rotations, this part of your body right in here, to simply try to feel the club in the most laid off position you can get it in. So if you look at Graham over here, you can see how that shaft shallows out, and then he can keep turning and rotating. And I think you can do the same thing. You guys are built very, very similarly. You have similar movements. You're just going to need to get more depth here, and you're going to need to rotate those forearms to get a little bit more of a laid off position. Hope this helps you. Shoot me an email if you have any questions.